Last week, a number of trade union federations took to the streets in a national strike, but very quickly the strike lost momentum. Why is this? Is trade union power diminishing in South Africa? Joining me to discuss this topic is my colleague Frans Cronje of the Centre for Risk Analysis. Welcome, Frans.
Morning, David.
So, Frans, the question that I just posed, what is your view? Do you think that trade unions are weakening in South Africa and their power is diminishing?
Yeah, look, we've thought for a long time that trade union influence in South Africa is vastly exaggerated. And in a poll done of firms last week, NIASA, the Employers Association, found that less than 10% of firms had been affected in any way whatsoever by the strike action. And I think that's corroboration for this long-held CRA view that union power in South Africa is not as significant as many trade unions and the South African government has led us to believe.
So, Frans, this has political implications because obviously COSATU, one of the largest trade union federations in the country, is a member of the Tripartite Alliance. How does this play out in terms of dynamics within the alliance? Is COSATU's influence going to be diminishing? What implications does that have for the political system more broadly?
Well, I think one of the lessons to come out of last week is that the trade unions should be careful about overplaying their hand. In a country with a very high rate of unemployment, such as that here, a rate that's increased vastly as a consequence of the lockdown, unions run the risk of presenting themselves as institutions that protect the interests of the relative elite, the employed elite, from the great mass of unemployed and fairly desperate people who would do anything for a job and an income. And I think even within union ranks, the idea might be starting to take hold that it's not worth sacrificing our jobs, our futures, our incomes to pursue the political and ideological ambitions of trade unions.
So I think something that's quite telling, Frans, is that as South Africa has deindustrialized, so too has the power of the industrial unions, specifically the mining and manufacturing unions. So now this means that COSATU as a trade union federation is mostly comprised of civil servants. Now this means that they have an interest in the continued expansion of the civil service and the growing size of the state, but that state is running out of money and can no longer afford such a significant wage bill. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are two major trends behind our view that union influence in South Africa is exaggerated. The first is that the proportion of the economically active population that is unionized has fallen by around half over the past 2 decades, from just over 30% of the economically active population that was unionized to now down to around 17%. And as that has happened, union power has been increasingly concentrated in and around the civil service, as the private sector, in a sense, got out of the union business. What that means is two things. The first is that as a share of the total workforce, trade unions hold far less sway than was the case 20 years ago or even a decade ago. And trade unions and their members increasingly work for one employer. And that employer is the South African government. And it's a government that's under a great fiscal pressure, running out of money. And the influence that unions still exert today is therefore largely an influence gifted to them by their ideological sympathizers in both the National Executive Committee of the ANC and in South Africa's cabinet. And should that, it's only a handful of people, sympathizers, be excised from both institutions, that would open in South Africa the way to Thatcher-style reforms with regard to union influence.
Okay, so there is some promise that the current policy logjam that constrains the labor market might be opened up, but that would be premised on the presence of a Thatcher-like figure, a hard, uncompromising reformer who initiates and drives through against union resistance some of the reforms that are so desperately needed. What are the prospects for such a figure emerging?
Well, there's the problem. The circumstances are right for it. There'd be broad public support for it. The political fallout would be relatively limited. But will the ideologies that continue to underpin union influence, will those be as rapidly eroded in the government? It's perfectly possible that it might happen, except that it's very difficult to identify the institution or the individuals that would lead that. And my advice through South Africa's medium term is that the disproportionate influence that trade unions have on economic policy broadly and on politics is likely to be sustained, although this is not justified by actually the facts on the ground, as it were, about the true reach, depth, and actual potential influence of the trade union movement. The point, David, is the substance. It's underpinned by ideology. It's not underpinned by substance. But in politics, that is perceptions are reality, and therefore the current position of unions might be artificially sustained. I think it has been artificially sustained for much of the past several years. It might be sustained for many years yet to come.
Frans, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks, David.
This and other analysis was featured in this morning's weekly risk alert, an exclusive product to the Center for Risk Analysis. If you would like to subscribe to this service, please do follow the link in the description below. We're running a 30-day free trial at the moment. Otherwise, please do give this video a like. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and join us tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for tomorrow's video. Take care.